Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. My name is Pastor Jeff Short, and today we're going to be talking about Jordan Peterson's new book, Rules for Life. And Jordan Peterson, if you don't know yet, if you haven't been on the internet lately, or you haven't been on YouTube specifically, you might not know that he's one of the greatest and hottest YouTube broadcasters right now. Because as a professor in Canada, he stood up against the Canadian government and said, I refuse to follow the government mandated law that you must use pronouns that are preferred by the other person. So if a transgender person comes up to you and say, I want you to call me, if it's a man and he wants you to call him her, the Canadian government had a policy, you must use the preferred pronoun, or you must use the preferred pronoun of a student. If he's teaching in a university classroom and some guy comes up to him and says, I want you to refer to me as her and she, then Jordan Peterson would say, no, I object to that. And so he stood up against the Canadian government and their forced gender pronouns, because he saw this as a violation of free speech, which it certainly is. But that's how his claim to fame was, that he stood up to the government of Canada. And since that moment, he has become famous as a free speech advocate, and he's also been a very highly articulate voice of, you might say, conservatism, or more accurately, libertarianism. And so many evangelical Christians have enjoyed hearing him in debate against the radical far left socialist secularist. He actually stands up to them, and he's highly articulate. He can put them down, he can refute them, and he can respond to their charges. And so he's a very strong voice for freedom and conservative values. And he has written a book. It's come out after all of the internet fame that he received in the last couple of years. Now, if you go on YouTube and you type in Jordan Peterson, you will see a ton of references to his interviews, debates, some of his lectures. He's put his lectures on video. The most interesting videos are, of course, him in debate with someone who is trying to belittle him or refute him or put him down or laugh at him. And little do they know, his debate opponent, little do they know that Jordan Peterson can stand his ground against any opponent in debate. It's incredible. He is very articulate, and he is able to state his opinions, and he's able to do it very, very clearly, concisely, precisely, and he's also able to refute his opponent's views strong. So if you go into a debate against Jordan Peterson and you think you're going to simply mop up the place and set him in his place, you are in a big, big trouble, because he is going to come and pretty much hand you your arguments dismantled on the table before you. So he's a very interesting and a very entertaining person to listen to. So, having listened to a number of his different videos and mostly audio, but also video, I decided, okay, well, I'm going to get the audio book of his new book. I think it's 10 Rules for Life. Don't have the book in front of me right now. I believe he's articulated 10 or 12 rules for life. I think it's 10 rules for life. And he goes through in the book and basically deals with these points that he's written about. And I have to say, after having gone through about half the audiobook, a little bit disappointed. Yes, I am I'm a little bit disappointed because the audio book, and I'm sure the print edition, it's Jordan Peterson is actually reading the audio book. So that's why I thought I'd go that route. I'd rather have him read the book, his own book, than to go through and just read the print edition. So I decided I'd go with the audio book. And I've been spending a few hours listening to Jordan Peterson read his best-selling book. And so going into this, I had high expectations because, again, when you go to YouTube and you click on one of his interviews, say, with some radical leftist, far left socialist or identity politics advocate, or someone who doesn't like him and they think they're going to dismantle him in this interview, if you go on the internet, YouTube, and you watch him, he basically shreds anyone who's trying to come after him and attack him and make him look small. He makes them look smaller even still. So that is one of the best videos that I would recommend listening and watching Jordan Peterson is when he's talking about gender pay equality. And basically he refutes the whole idea that women as a whole are being underpaid for their work. And he wants to refute the idea that it's based on patriarchy or male chauvinism or inequality. He wants to refute that idea because he argues that there's so many different factors involved in why women choose certain types of work. It's also, there are factors involved. For example, if they want to take some time off to take care of their children, they need to have a flexible job. They can't have one of these careers that is so high demanding that children are out of the picture, and so they tend not to take those positions. And they also, and he goes on through the whole list of items that one is, for example, that women tend not to ask for pay raises as much as men. So they tend to accept or are satisfied with the pay that they're receiving, and so they don't aggressively go in and ask for a pay raise. Whereas a man, a counterpart in that same position, might decide that he's going to go in and ask for a pay raise and be bold and be aggressive and so assertive, you might say. So men tend to get more pay raises because they ask, and so that's a simple fact, and Jordan Peterson brings that out. So his point in one of the most famous videos, or some of his famous videos, is that there really isn't this gender pay inequality crisis as the feminists want to convince us there is. There really isn't. And so he goes through and he takes on all these different critics, and he calmly and rationally shows them why they're wrong and shows them why he is correct. So those are some of the best interactions you'll see of Jordan Peterson on the internet. Now, when you get to the book, it's not that way. At least it's not that way for the first half. And I'll let you know how the last half goes when I get through the entire book. But the book is essentially a self-help psychological book. That's what it is. He brings into the book his internet fame. He brings into the book his debate victories. He brings into the book his public intellectual prowess. He brings into the book all of these things that he's famous for. And then when you read and begin to listen to the book, it's basically a self-help psychological book. He's a psychologist, psychiatrist. He talks about a lot of different things that he's learned in his field, principles for life, tips on how to get along with people and how to get along with coworkers and so on and so forth. It's a really, that's what it is. You would find it under the self-help section at the bookstore or library. And he goes through and talks about a number of important principles that everyone should be aware of in their interactions with others. He talks, for example, about people who have been dominated, and how they actually physically and emotionally think of themselves as beaten down, and he thinks of the domineers and how they think of themselves in their own eyes and carry themselves in life as if they are on the top, if they are the elite, and they treat other people as if they're below them, and so on and so forth, and all the psychological ramifications of that. Okay, very interesting, very helpful. And you can see these principles in everyday life, and you can apply them, and they can be useful at times, just knowing that these dynamics are taking place. But, again, the book is a psychological self-help book, and it's dispensing sort of the secular wisdom. Now, Jordan Peterson is a secularist. He is a secular humanist. In fact, he's actually, I believe, if you look at all of his comments and put all of his comments about God and the Bible and everything together, you're going to find that he's actually either agnostic or an atheist. So he doesn't believe in God. He is a heavy Darwinist. He's a heavy evolutionary Darwinist. He explains these psychological principles on the basis of Darwin's theory of evolution. He uses the crab or the lobster for an example, and he traces the development of the lobster, and he explains the lobster's behavior in purely evolutionary terms. And then he also then applies that to humans, and he applies it through evolutionary psychology, and explains a lot of the principles that he talks about in terms of Darwinian evolution. And that humans have been here for millions and millions of years, and so on and so forth. So, and he talks about we are lobster relatives, and all kinds of Darwinistic terminology and phraseology, and everything is explained in terms of Darwinism. Well, as Christians, we don't believe that everything can be explained through Darwinism. We don't believe that Darwin explained the mechanism through his triumph of the strong over the weak and survival of the fittest, and so on and so forth. We don't believe that explains everything. That can explain, we believe, biblical, Bible-believing Christians believe that, yes, there are micro-evolutionary forces at work in the world. We believe that, for example, trees can compete with other trees for being the highest and tallest trees so that they can reach the sun and have the most exposure to sunlight. And we believe that dogs, for example, when they're bred, domestic breeding, that you can change the shape and form and characteristics of dogs all within a specific type. The basic dog, you can mold and shape the dog through domestic breeding to take on different shapes and sizes and characteristics. We believe that we believe in that limited microevolution. But as far as taking some kind of a one-celled amoeba and evolving that into humans through the evolutionary process, we don't believe that. We believe that only God is able to create life from scratch, and that only God can bring about the different major types of creatures on this earth. And so we would differ in the very bedrock of Jordan Peterson's explanation for life itself, which is he would wholeheartedly buy into the full throttle theory of Darwinian evolution. He would buy into that, and he does buy into that, and he uses that as an explanation. We as Christians would not want to go with him there. And so some of the things that he talks about are theory dependent, that you have to buy into the whole theory of Darwinism in order to even acknowledge or recognize anything about what he's saying. Specifically in terms of the lobster analogy, and if you read his book, you'll realize that he relies on the lobster as an example of hierarchy and the dynamic there in the lobster world, where you have some dominant lobsters and you have some submissive lobsters, and the ones that are submissive always get the scraps of the more dominant lobster, and that same principle through evolution, he believes, has carried on through to humans. And so you have some people who respond a certain way to life, and they tend to be at the bottom, and then other people respond a certain way to life, and they're at the top, and so on and so forth. And you can explain human civilizations that way also, and he does that. Because we don't believe that nature produced human beings the way Darwinian evolution articulates it, and as the way Jordan Peterson articulates it, then his illustrations would not hold as much weight. But we can still see there is a similarity in some aspects between lobsters and humans, and we can understand what he's talking about. But you definitely have to understand that he is a full-blown Darwinist, and he is also an atheist. Now, when I say he's an atheist, I should qualify that. He is an atheist, but he uses Christian terminology and he uses religious terminology. So he doesn't want to be Richard Dawkins atheist. He doesn't want to be someone who just repudiates all religion. Or he doesn't want to be the Christopher Hitchens atheist, which is religion poisons everything. He doesn't want to take that hostile view about religion. He wants to say, no, religion is something that also evolved, so it's very valuable. It's very valuable to human beings, because all of these beliefs and convictions and signs and symbols that are found, for example, in the Bible, those evolved in a different way than biological evolution, but they evolved in our minds, and they're hardwired into our brains, many of these beliefs, and so they've been useful in survival through the ages. So he takes a Darwinian view of religion, which is very similar to what you would run into in theological liberalism. And I've concluded through this book and listening to him on other occasions on YouTube and so on and so forth, he is a theological liberal. He doesn't take the Bible at face value. He doesn't accept the historical events as presented in the Bible. For example, the Exodus, Moses leading the children of Israel out of Egypt, bondage out of Egypt, coming to the Red Sea. God does a supernatural miracle. They cross over and they escape from Pharaoh's army. Peterson does not see that as a historical event. He sees it as something that symbolizes something that has great meaning and symbolizes or is a representation of some higher psychological truth. So that's what he does to the Bible. Well, we're used to that. We've heard theologians do that for now a century, at least a century, century and a half, even 2 centuries. And that is what we call theological liberalism, where you don't take Christianity at face value, you change it and you fit it into the current intellectual landscape. And so we've seen that in Schleiermacher, the theologian. We've seen that in Paul Tillich. We've seen that you can just name a number of famous theologians who have gone in this direction. And Jordan Peterson is actually following them. So as Christians, we want to say no. We won't, not only will we not follow you into Darwinism, we won't follow you into theological liberalism either. For example, Jordan Peterson, in this book, he actually goes into explaining how the Bible was put together. And his explanation is what you would get in a theologically liberal seminary. He's talking about the documentary hypothesis. He's talking about different sources were brought together by some unknown editors in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And this is what is called the JEDP theory. This is what liberals have been talking about at least for a century or century and a half now. This is what evangelical Bible-believing Christians have refuted and written against, and because it's dishonest to the text, it's dishonest to Jesus and the apostles. Jesus took the biblical accounts of Adam and Eve. He took the biblical account of Jonah and the whale. He took the biblical accounts of Moses and Joshua and all the different accounts in the Old Testament. He took them at face value. Jesus Christ treated those accounts as historical, factual, face value accounts of what really happened. Well, Jordan Peterson doesn't. He sees them all as symbols of some higher religious psychological meaning. And so as Christians, we have to be very careful that we don't buy into this theological liberalism, just as we have to be careful that we don't buy into this Darwinian evolutionary, macro evolutionary explanation for how we get life as we have it today. So Jordan Peterson is a secularist. He is either an agnostic or atheist. He is not a Bible-believing Christian. Now, he may want to call himself a Christian. He might want to use that terminology. But that's the same way the theological liberals have been for over a century. They want to use the name Christian. They want to use the churches that call themselves Christian churches. They want to use the Bible. They want to use all of the traditional hymns. They want to use the Christian symbols, the cross. They want to use everything, but they want to reinterpret it all. So they want to take the Christian religion and then they want to retool it for the modern time. Bring it up to speed, so to speak. Make it compatible with the academic, intellectual world of today. And as faithful Bible-believing Christians, we want to say, no, we leave it as it is because this is the way God revealed himself and this is the way God wants the world to operate. And we don't want to change what God has said. So you have to be aware that these are the things that Jordan Peterson is talking about. The book also, having gone through half of it, it's also very self-centered. It's talking about you, and it's talking about how you can help yourself and how you can have a more fulfilling life and how you can achieve this. And it's a very self-centered book. Now, there are occasions in the book where he talks about, well, maybe the best way to get to the best you is to think of other people and to think of the world and be more focused on others than self. And so, but by and large, when you get right down to it, these are rules for life, for your life. And if you apply these rules and use this secular wisdom that Jordan Peterson is giving, your life will go better and you will be more fulfilled and you will have a better life and you will get more of the things you want. And so it's a very self-centered, self-help philosophy. And now, why has Jordan Peterson become so popular, and why have people flocked to hear him, and especially young men want to follow after him? We have to realize, and you have to listen to Jordan Peterson either as he talks or as he presents his lectures or he's in debate. Jordan Peterson has a lot of passion. Jordan Peterson has a lot of conviction, and he's able to look someone right in the eye and say, this is what I believe, this is my conviction, here's why I believe it, and he's able to take on people who don't believe what he believes. He has the courage of his convictions. He's passionately committed to his self-help philosophy. And he explains and articulates his views with a lot of passion, and he explains and articulates his views with a lot of conviction. So you really believe he's not sort of just ho-hum. This is what I've discovered in my research, and you can take it or leave it, whatever. No, he is actually advocating and promoting a certain viewpoint. And this is actually how he became famous, was because he was reacting against the Canadian government imposing a particular type of speech upon citizens. He didn't want to be told how to speak to other people and the words to use in talking and interacting with other people. And so it got him, it made him mad, and it made him passionately an advocate of free speech. And so when you hear him talk and when you hear him defend his views, he's very passionate, and he actually can get emotional, and that draws people to him, that draws a lot of interest around him. And so you can understand why people would find him interesting and listen to him and want to hear what he has to say, because he's being talking with conviction, and he's talking with passion, and he's excited about something, and he gets emotional, and almost in a sense, you could see Jordan Peterson, if he wanted to go in the direction of a cult leader, you could see him going in that direction. I don't believe that he would. I believe he's more level-headed than that. But if he began to take himself too serious, and he began to take his own theories and his writings and his views more seriously than they deserve, or too seriously, or take himself seriously, or believe some of the people, the things they say about him or his fans, yes, you could see him becoming a cult leader very easily. And he could start a little cult, and there would be a Peterson cult. But I don't think he's going to do that, and I don't think there's any worry that that would ever happen. I think he's more level-headed than that. But these are my impressions of the first half of the book, and stay tuned for the last half of the book review in a forthcoming program. We'll see you back next week. God bless.